Hey, fifth grade. This is your next YouTube video on the lesson of subtracting with renaming. But before we actually get into that subtracting, I want to show you how to actually rename a number, especially a mixed number. Okay, so let's say I have the number 2 and I needed to rename it, and we'll need to rename things to help us subtract here a little bit later. But one way I can rename that is I could take this 2 and rename it. And I could rename it to something like 1 3/3. Okay, because 3/3 is a whole, okay, but we made it into a fraction to help us out in changing the name. Okay, so if I had to rename that 2 could become 1 3/3. Okay, they are equivalent to each other, and you'll see why I'm doing this a little bit later on. Okay, but let's take a mixed number for a second. Let's say I have 5 2/5, and I needed to rename it because we're going to use that later on. I could borrow one whole from the 5, okay, and so I would change it. So if I'm going to borrow the one whole, I'm going to take that one whole and I'm going to put it with the fraction. Okay, so instead of 5 now I have 4. Okay, but I'm going to take that whole doesn't go away, it's going to go with the fraction. And I'm going to use that denominator to help me. So 1 whole out of fifths is 5/5. So I'm going to take that 5/5 and put it with the 2/5 that's already there. So 5/5 and 2/5 makes 7/5. So another way to write 5 2/5 might be 4 7/5. The reason I'm showing you this ahead of time is because we're going to rename fractions to help us subtract here in the lesson.